The year is 1577, and Japan is ablaze in the midst of the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period. Years of civil war and administrative neglect from the Ashikaga shogunate had brought nothing but infighting to the otherwise peaceful isles. Many local lords, called daimyo, fight to expand their political power far and wide, seeking to undermine the shogun himself and proclaim themselves as being fit for the office instead. One of these daimyo, known to history as one of the three great unifiers of Japan, is Oda Nobunaga. Despite fierce resistance, Nobunaga had managed to conquer deep into the Kansai region of Japan years prior, and had managed to install the current shogun, Yoshiaki, as his puppet. By this point, he was reigning practically unchecked, as under his guidance the Oda clan had dominated most of the country's legislative and monetary functions. He was, even during his life, the subject of many legends. However, Nobunaga was not the only legendary general of Japan alive at this time, and soon, he would face the most cunning and clever enemy of his entire career. Welcome to our video on the Battle of Tedorigawa. Oda Nobunaga was a man of great skill and expertise in all the areas he needed to be. A great diplomat, general, logistician, and an opportunist. He went from being known as the Fool of Owari to holding the whole of Japan in the palm of his hand. Through careful planning and swift action, he had placed several provinces under his control and successfully fended off every attempt to counter his expansion. Ever since the Battle of Okehazama in 1560, where Nobunaga defeated the renowned Imagawa Yoshimoto, he had been unstoppable in his martial endeavors. He then tore through his opposition in his march to Kyoto, where he elevated the aforementioned Yoshiaki as the shogun, defeating all who resisted his ever-growing power on the way. Yoshiaki, being the cousin of the previous shogun, claimed the title after the latter died from a disease shortly after his ascension. Now that Nobunaga had installed him, Yoshiaki acted as his puppet, even addressing Nobunaga as his father. This newfounded power struck fear into the hearts of many daimyo across Japan, which caused even the mention of his name to bring them intimidation. As history often tells us, however, power brings envy and fear, as in 1570, when Nobunaga moved against his enemies to the north of Kyoto, the Sakura clan, he expected his brother-in-law, Azai Nagamasa, who was allied to both belligerents of the war, to take his side and support him. However, Nagamasa so feared the expansion of the Oda, he instead took the opposing side, that of the Asakura, coordinated a surprise attack on the Nobunaga forces at the Battle of Anegawa. Despite being unprepared, Nobunaga was able to defeat his treacherous relative and forced his army to retreat. He then had him hunted down, tracking him for a whole 3 years before finding and besieging him at Odani Castle, where Nagamasa committed ritual seppuku to escape his fate. It was this that caused many to realize just how dangerous Nobunaga really was, and many of his allies began to question whether their friendly relations with the Oda clan were really favoring their future prospects. One of these allies from the province of Echigo was Uesugi Kenshin. Kenshin was a general of a formidable degree, having bested many in his military pursuits. He was also praised for his stalwart stewardship, which had brought prosperity to the lands under his rule. Kenshin was known to be one of the most clever generals of his day, even being able to foretell his enemies' plans, like during the fourth battle of Kawanakajima against the daimyo Takeda Shingen. Kenshin's reputation was a fierce one, which had worried Nobunaga after he had learned of his desire to cut ties with the Oda clan. Nobunaga, always seeking to consolidate his power, was preoccupied focusing his time attacking and suppressing a new Buddhist sect known as the Ikko-Ikki in the city of Osaka, just west of Kyoto. The Ikko-Ikki were an offshoot of the Jodo Shinshu school of Buddhist thought, and they resented Nobunaga, especially after he had ordered the killing of several thousand monks at Mount Hiei. They preached opposition to his rule, and convinced many within the Oda territory to become disgruntled with his reign. After raiding many villages which supported them though, Nobunaga had learned that the Ikko-Ikki were assisted by none other than Kenshin, a former Buddhist monk himself. As a show of force, he decided to send his general, Sho Shigetsura, to the province of Noto, right next to the Uesugi clan's holding. In Noto, a civil war had broken out, and Shigetsura was ordered to aid in re-establishing stability at the request that the ruling Hatakeyama clan swear fealty to the Oda for extending the offer of help. He was able to do this fairly quickly and made his stay at the Nanao Castle in the northern part of the province. This meant that Nobunaga's control now stretched to the border of Kenshin's claims, and he knew action needed to be taken as soon as possible. Immediately, Kenshin gathered his army and entered the province of Noto, besieging the castle of Nanao, where Shigetsura was residing. Shigetsuda sent out a letter, frantically pleading that Nobunaga send a relief force to attack the surrounding enemy. Enraged at having to divide his time between the Ikkoiki and now the Usagi, he departed with his best generals and headed for Nanao. He had brought with him Shibata Katsuie, Maeda Toshiie, Sasa Narimasa to command his force, as well as his eventual betrayer Akechi Mitsuhide and eventual successor Toyotomi Hideyoshi as backup generals. His force was massive. In fact, it was the largest ever commanded by Nobunaga, numbering nearly 50,000 men. Meanwhile, back in Noto, Kenshin managed to collaborate in secret with a local vassal, getting him to open the gates of Nanao Castle, which allowed the Usagi army to rush in and kill Shigetsuda and his family. Kenshin was then informed of the approaching Oda forces and moved south to meet them. By now, Nobunaga had just made his way into Noto province, after crossing the Tedori River, in Japanese Tedorigawa, where the forthcoming battle will take place. Seeing the approaching Usagi forces and learning of the castle's fall, he ordered his troops to go back and across the river so that there would be a buffer between the two armies, giving him time to replan his attack. Kenshin set up his army on his side of the river and observed the Oda force. The Oda brought matchlocks, which they acquired from Western traders, giving them a technological lead. He knew that he had to fight this battle defensively to stand a chance. He planned with his heir, who he had brought along with him on campaign, Ueseki Kagetora. They noticed that the clouds overhead indicated that there would soon be rainfall, about the time that the sun was going to set. They knew that this would affect the ability of their opponent's matchlocks, as the water would make it impossible for the gunpowder to be operational. They waited till dusk, and just as expected, the rain began to fall. Soon after, in the darkness of night, knowing that their enemy was ready to jump at any opportunity, Kenshin sent roughly 1,000 men in full view of Nobunaga and the Oda force. Nobunaga, after having sent a scout up the river, found that there was a bridge and realized that this was most likely some sort of flanking maneuver by Kenshin, and sent a few thousand men back and to the right to guard against this. Nobunaga then talked with his generals and came to the conclusion that they should use this time to attack while Kenshin's forces were divided. He put his generals Katsuie, Toshiie, and Narimasa in his front line and ordered them to attack once a contingent of Usagi forces were so far up the pass they were out of sight. After this, they pushed forward towards the river, hoping to catch Kenshin off guard, who rushed to meet them and positioned his infantry on the banks of the river. The Oda spearmen hurried to the river, which was up to their knees, and engaged Kenshin's line. Due to the river being so high up on their bodies, they quickly became uncoordinated in their attack, as well as partially immobilized. The length of their spears actually worked against them, since it was not easy to use a spear with the shaft a fourth of the way into the rushing water, as well as now having to fight uphill along the banks. Nevertheless, they persisted, though not doing as well as they had expected. The battle continued to rage for some time, with neither side gaining the upper hand, though the Oda spearmen were dying at a much faster rate. As time passed, their energy diminished from the stressful conditions the river had imposed upon them, and their depletion in numbers only grew as the seconds passed. It was then that Nobunaga got the surprise of his life when he saw a burst of water coming down the river, headed straight for his men. He yelled for his generals to order a retreat, but it was too late. The water slammed into the spearmen of the Oda, causing Nobunaga's men to crash into each other, pulling more and more of them downstream. They are now up to their necks in water, dropping their spears and attempting to swim back to the shore for their lives, their armor preventing those who had been swept under by the intense current from surfacing. Unbeknownst to Nobunaga, the bridge that Kenshin's contingent were heading to had a built-in dam and floodgates. Kenshin ordered them to open it once they had arrived, knowing that the Oda would take the bait and be caught in the river. He chose a significantly larger amount of men than necessary to complete the task, as a further bait for Nobunaga to take advantage of the divided army, as well as the fact that he would have to pull some men back to guard what he would likely perceive to be a flank. Nobunaga watched helplessly and full of shame as his army was reduced from 50,000 to a mere fraction of what it once was in just minutes. When the survivors made it to shore, he ordered a search party to collect them and bring them back to the army. Knowing that he could do nothing, he looked across to see the Usagi standing firm and gave an orderly retreat. As he left, he heard the loud cheers and celebratory shouts of Kenshin's army praising their general for his abilities. A bleak day for the Oda clan and those who stuck with them, but a victorious one for the rest of Japan, who now felt a little less threatened by the might of Nobunaga. Despite his phenomenal victory, Kenshin would not live much longer himself, and in the next year he died from esophageal cancer. Kenshin's heir, Uesegi Kagetora, who was present at Tedorigawa, was never able to establish his claim to the head of the Uesegi clan, and was forced to commit seppuku by Uesegi Kagekatsu, who now succeeded Kenshin. Kagekatsu did not fare well martially, and he lost much of what Kenshin had gained during his life to the Oda clan when Nobunaga had returned in 1578. Nobunaga had conquered much of the Uesegi territory before his own death in 1582 at the hands of Akechi Mitsuhide, an Oda general also present at Tedorigawa. We thank our first patron, John Samiskis, for the support, and if you would like to be featured at the end of our videos, as well as gain other bonuses, be sure to check out our Patreon in the description below. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we thank you for watching. We ask that if you enjoyed the video and you want to see more about the Sengoku Jidai from our channel, you leave a like and subscribe. Once again, we thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.